Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome everybody to episode number 70 of CBD Talk Podcast. And tonight we have a fellow podcaster. Actually, he has the Marketplace podcast, which is not CBD related, but has a lot of great stuff on it. So we'll chat about that at the end. But I want you to meet Priest Willis. How you doing tonight, Priest?
I'm doing good, Dawn. How about yourself? Thank you for having me on.
Yay. Priest he's been very successful in network marketing business and other areas as well. And you're out of North Carolina, right?
I am. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, to be exact.
How about you just give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, so really simple. In fact, I've been living in Raleigh, North Carolina for 6 years. Prior to this, I used to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's where I was born and raised, so further up north there. I have 4 kids and a wife. We've been living down here, of course, together. My oldest is 23. He'll be 24 next month, in fact. And then my youngest is 12, and he'll be 13 in August. And as you mentioned, I've been in the internet marketing or e-commerce marketing space now for about as long as the oldest, so 20 plus years. I do primarily my 9 to 5, if you will, is with Lenovo, which is a computer company. They compete against like Dell, HP, all those guys.
Yeah, I actually that's what I'm on, is a Lenovo.
That's what I'm on too. That's what I'm on. Well, that's a great plug then. So we actually moved down here for Lenovo, and then additionally I have an agency and some other side stuff that I work on, and I kind of had a podcast, as you mentioned, that kind of sprung from the agency side, but we've had so many good guests that the audience it built up really well. So I kind of broke the podcast away from the agency side, if you will. And now it lives completely on its own. It, financially, it kind of takes care of itself. So that's kind of my primary focus right now.
That's beautiful. So you are joining us tonight to talk about CBD. So how about you tell us how you got into the CBD world and how it helps you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I'm not a marijuana smoker, so CBD never crossed my mind. I realized when I was about 27 years old, I'm about 44 now, that something was different about me, just chemically, that is. And I went into the doctor. At first, they would try to figure it out. It would kind of play itself out in hypochondriac, like I'm having a heart attack or something along those lines. So shortly I found out I was having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And I went into a doctor, and finally one of the doctors was like, dude, I think you have general anxiety. And so I was prescribed citalopram. I'm not necessarily a fan of taking pills. I don't try to do them totally away when necessary. I mean, I broke my ankle, so I'll take something there. But I just realized that, look, this isn't something I want to take from like now forever.
Yeah.
So I started doing a little research, and sure enough, I started coming down about CBD and started researching and reading about it. And I'm like, well, I can't get my hands on it because when you read about it online, it just feels so illegal. At least in my mind, it was like, well, where can I possibly buy this from? Until I went to like a Whole Foods, or I started reading about Charlotte's Web. I went to a Whole Foods, and I'm like, hey, wait, hemp? And then I started to realize that Wisconsin, it comes down to labeling. There's can't necessarily get stock in certain states where you can't, the states I live in at least, where you can't put it on the shelf if it says CBD, but if it says hemp. And so all this and that. So I started taking it, and I realized, within a week, that it was, I could feel it in myself, like a massive difference. So I just realized this anxiety thing was chemical for me. So I started playing around with CBD and better understanding how it reacts to my body. And then I wanted to know more about CBD. So it just created a rabbit hole at that point for me.
So what did you start out with, and what are you taking now?
So I started off in terms of just
like dosing.
Uh,
Like, were you doing tincture? Were you doing edibles? Were you doing
yep.
capsules, vaping?
Yep. So I was doing tinctures, and it was with Charlotte's Web to start with. Now I've tried some others, and we probably can talk about that.
Mhm,
It's kind of tricky when you start going outside of that. Like I would buy products on Amazon
mhm,
that felt a lot more watery and all this stuff.
mhm,
But I typically take a sublingual. This is
mhm,
I typically take about two droplets of it.
mhm,
I take it every day.
mhm,
It's mint chocolate. I still stick with Charlotte's Web primarily. Again, I'll play with some other stuff. I've
mhm,
never done gummies. I've never done any kind of edibles. Not that I would be against it. I
mhm.
just haven't.
Well, and
And
if you have something that works.
exactly. So it's something that kind of worked for me.
Mhm,
So I just I would play around with different products, and you and I talked offline about Vadim, the CBD professor. So him
mhm,
and I would talk about different products. So I would find more and more, and I've had guests on my show that have talked about CBD products. So I would play with stuff, but it always seems to work my way back to Charlotte's Web. Again, taking about two droplets sublingually, and I do that daily. And then if I'm traveling or I feel like anxiety is even going a little different,
mhm.
I'll take maybe an extra dosage at that point.
Right.
But I will tell you, Dawn, I haven't had any panic attacks in maybe 5 years.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, maybe 5 years. I haven't had a panic attack. Obviously anxiety will set in, but the difference levels of
Mhm,
anxiety is massively different. And if I could just tell people, when I was growing up, I grew up with my mother and father. And when I look back and think about the relationship that I had with my dad was a good dad, but he must have had anxiety. He's passed
mhm,
away now, but
mhm,
he must have had anxiety, but never really took the extra step like I
mhm.
did to kind of go into the doctor or even try to research my own body. So I'm thankful for getting to this point and being able to find something like this.
Yeah, because there's people who will never take that step.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what strength are you buying with your Charlotte's Web? Like I'm guessing it's a 1 ounce bottle or 30 milliliter bottle. How many milligrams um are in that? Is like 500, 750, 1,000?
Yeah, I this one particular bottle that I'm getting is 500.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so you're taking one dropper full, or I mean, you're taking two dropper fulls?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
because I just want to give people
An
like,
idea of what the
yeah.
dosage I'm taking. I
Mhm.
got it. Yep.
Yeah, because that's one of the things is that you, it's really there's the catch 22 in the industry when it comes to putting dosing on anything because then the FDA gets you.
Right.
And that's why it's really good to be able to have a product where you can actually speak with the people that sell it.
True.
Because otherwise, I know it can be really difficult. So I appreciate you sharing what you do for your anxiety because other people might be able to think, well, I can try that. Or they might try, start out with one dropper and then, feel their way around that and increase or
Yeah.
decrease.
Yeah, and that's why I'm always hesitant because when
Mhm,
I first started off, I mean, I did do like one drop. It really is. I mean, again, this goes back to our body is really
mhm,
really like an intricate chemical thing. So I could take two droppers. Somebody might get it and say Priest was totally he was smoking the drapes because this doesn't work for me. You really have to kind of play with your body and be willing to experiment a little bit
mhm,
and do the research behind CBD and
mhm,
understand. That's why it was important for me to bring people on my podcast because I didn't fully understand it. So I
mhm,
had a FDA agent who was on who was
mhm.
now selling CBD on her own. So
Good.
she would explain the laws and the different
Mhm,
variations of what happened. There's so much there's so much politics that's wrapped up in it,
mhm.
including in North America, or excuse me, in North Carolina here, where
Oh yeah.
how they label it
Mhm,
versus what's actually there. Like it it just opens up a whole different world for people if they understood kind of the backdoor workings of how this really plays out throughout the different states.
And can I get afterwards? Can I get some links to those episodes that we can put in the show notes so that if people want to listen to those, they can?
You bet. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Great.
For sure.
So we
even down to the flavor, by the way. I'm sorry, Dawn. Like, for, I was taking like a rosemary and mint chocolate. So even down to the flavor is where for me it just it just kind of it does something a little different for me again.
Yeah. Well, because when you have like the flavonoids in there,
Yep.
it does change things because terpenes have an effect, in addition to the cannabinoids. And so when you really have that combination of different cannabinoids, unless you're doing an isolate, if you're doing like a full spectrum or broad spectrum, they say no, if there's no THC in it, you've got a different kind of a menu there with the different cannabinoids, and then you throw terpenes in and flavonoids in, and it all works together in a certain way. So you take one part out of that, and it might, even though it's like it's a flavor, it can actually change the way it works for your body. And like you said, everyone's got a different tolerance. The cannabinoid system is different in everyone. Some people's cannabinoid systems are more effective where they don't need as much of a supplement. Some people's are like, for God's sakes, give them a bolus and just wake that baby up. So,
yeah. I mean, even down to the milligrams, right? So, I mean, I would, for me, I kind of started small and I stepped up, but I never went for the big, give me the 60 milligrams or whatever. I kind of know that it's kind of a test for my body, right? So.
Right, but people don't realize sometimes either about the biphasic effects of CBD. To where you've got that bell curve, and if you take too much, the efficacy actually drops off. So that's why it's really good. Like a lot of because I work with a lot of people, and I based on what they're experiencing, because everyone's different and everyone's symptoms are different. Whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, whether it's anxiety, whether it's someone who has like cancer, or there's so many different ways to look at it with the different symptoms. When you really look at somebody or work with somebody and you take into account what they're experiencing, their symptoms, whether it involves pain or if it's an immune problem or something like that, sometimes it's a good thing to give it a good shot, to kind of just like wake it up. And that's actually what I did with mine, because I have Neil Patella syndrome, which is a genetic mutation. And so I was taking and I was using a nano encapsulated. So I was taking the first couple days, I took it 5 times a day. The third day, because I would just, whenever symptoms came back, I'd take it again.
Did you notice anything right away? Was there something? Okay.
I did, but I was also taking a nano encapsulated, and the nano encapsulated, it doesn't get digested. It just gets right into your system right away. So within 15 minutes, you're feeling it.
Yeah.
And so when the symptoms would come back, I'd take it again. I'd take it again. So after a couple of days, I was down to like 3 times a day. And by the end of the week, I was once a day. So it just depends. Well, it just depends on your symptoms and your body.
It does. And that was kind of, just to add the disclaimer, I guess when I first started taking CBD, my first reaction, because again, I didn't understand the CBD component in THC. I just knew that it worked, right? So when I went into the CBD, I'm thinking to myself, okay, because regardless if somebody says 0 THC, what we've learned is there's always going to be some nth degree possibly THC. But me not understanding what that really meant, I'm like, oh, I hope I don't get high. And you're sitting around taking the CBD and you're like waiting. You're like, I'm not high yet. And so you start to learn about the components and the ingredients within cannabidiol and how it works within your body and what the THC actually does to your body. It was just, it was a whole layer of education for me that was so helpful. And, as I started talking to other people about it, it did one or two things. First of all, it opened up the discussion about CBD, which now it's a lot more popular than it was at one point. But it also opened up the conversation for me about anxiety, because
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, particularly doing with Black people, a lot of Black people culturally don't talk about anxiety and mental illnesses for a large part.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of gives you a chance to say, no, look, I have general anxiety and I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
find those levels, because even when you're at the doctor and they give you citalopram or some medicine, they're always talking to you about serotonin levels and
Mm-hmm.
what the medicine does to raise up serotonin. So it's all chemical to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to find something that will naturally flow with your body, and this is what I found. So
And
not to go
without the side effects.
right. So totally, like this, I will say this: citalopram never had any side effects for me.
Good.
I never had cotton mouth. I never was dizzy. I never felt like, a lot of people will say they don't feel like themselves. I never had any kind of reactions to the
Mm-hmm.
medicine whatsoever. But my whole point was, I had no idea what it was doing to my liver, or
Mm-hmm.
over time what it's doing to my other organs, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
trying to find out either. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to wean myself away from it, because I don't want to go into a doctor and he'll be like, well, it's great you don't have side effects, but I didn't know it was going to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to find out when it's too late. So my goal is to take my cure in the best way I think it should go in.
So what do you think was the biggest surprise that you got from CBD that you just didn't expect?
About how fast it corrected things.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my anxiety was really general, so I don't want to slight it, but it only the thoughts you would have. So if work became very stressful, those were major triggers. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm, throughout my career, I've been in very stressful jobs. So those triggers happened often. And we're talking about eyes twitching. We're talking about sometimes sweating and you just feeling like the world is closing in on you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but CBD, how fast it reacted. I swear I thought I was going to take a bottle of it and still wait after that, because I would read Amazon reviews. I would read reviews on Charlotte's Web. There
Mm-hmm.
were obviously people had different responses to
Mm-hmm.
it. So I didn't know what to expect, but I thought it would take longer, and it was actually pretty quick turnaround. As I mentioned, it was probably about a week or so.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's great. So, you're married.
I am.
So did your wife have any response to you taking it?
Well, that's a very good question, actually. So it's an interesting discussion to have, because like we just talked about a few minutes ago, this is a really good question, Dawn. So I am, I'm trying to explain. So let me tell you why this is really interesting. So we came out of a church,
Mm-hmm.
and we were in church for 14, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked away because there was just things I didn't believe anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't subscribe to 90+% of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still some of that doctrine that rolls around in you sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so here I am looking like I'm going from one end of the spectrum to the other, where now all of a sudden I'm jumping into, and people
The
don't
devil's lettuce.
That's a good. Okay, you caught me off. Yeah, so you look like you're jumping off into the devil's lettuce, and you're explaining. So first of all, my wife was the first person that I really had an intimate conversation with about my anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
For a couple years, I kind of suffered in silence a little bit, for all the reasons that I told you about earlier, just not wanting to discuss it, or
Mm-hmm.
not knowing if people would understand or be even empathetic about it. But
Mm-hmm.
and now, so we come out of a church. I actually helped start two churches. I actually set up one in the inner city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to walk away from the church completely and say, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that about the doctrine, so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That was one shake, not for my wife. My wife was totally on board,
Mm-hmm.
but just to a lot of people. Then we come down here and I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this CBD thing.
Mhm.
She knows it's for my anxiety because I explained it,
Mhm.
but it was kind of a jolt for our souls because
Mhm.
it's like, wow, you're going into the devil's lettuce. And it was like,
Mhm.
well, yes and no. And so now we're having the discussion, right? We're talking
Mhm.
about what CBD is, how do the compounds work, and so forth and so on. And so, if nothing, I believe she's educated about it. She was
Mhm.
excited about me doing it. But my wife has always been extremely supportive. I never thought she would judge me or
Mhm.
question what I'm doing. It's just it was more in me about having that discussion in
Right.
general about doing the devil's lettuce or getting involved in some of the devil's lettuce dressing, if you will. Some
Yeah.
of
Yeah, and it is, that it just takes more as much education as we can get out there to explain to people that, cannabidiol is one component of the plant, and
yeah,
it's not intoxicating in any way, shape, or form.
not at all, not
So
at all.
so
And I
she noticed a difference?
oh for sure. I
Mhm.
mean, listen, it's very apparent to me too. I mean, there were things that now, as I step outside of myself, you realize some of the things that you struggled with that doesn't necessarily that you don't struggle with anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, she absolutely knows the difference. I think she was actually very happy that I kind of took it upon myself to kind of educate myself, find the right ingredients for myself, and I still try to do other natural things to put
Mhm.
inside there, which is something that I would suggest to people too.
Mhm.
But there's absolutely no doubt that part of me climbing out of this fog, if you will, has been the steps that I've taken with CBD.
That's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful, and the improvement and the difference that it's made in your relationship. Also, I mean, it to be able to not have that anxiety in a family situation like you were talking about with your father.
Yeah, and
That.
listen, education is key. Don, I'll say it again. Like
Mhm.
having the podcast and having a platform to be able to have discussions with people who are in the CBD business, not being afraid to reach out to people and say, "Educate me about this."
Mhm.
Read Wikipedia. Go out there, read different sites. There's so much information about it. Sometimes. My father, it's interesting. When I was younger, he used to tell me, boy, the more I teach you, the dumber I get. And I'd be like, hey, wait a minute. Um, but right, like, hey, so are you saying I'm smart or what? I don't know.
I'm so
But
confused. Yeah.
right, that sounded like a backhanded compliment.
Uh,
But it is. But there's so much information. Sometimes I think we're dumb to that in a
yeah,
sense. Like there's so much readily available for people to read about CBD and
but not all
I
of it's accurate either.
that's very true. And that's why
Yeah.
I think you need to find good sources like
Hmm.
what you have here, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're right. It's not all
National
accurate.
Institute of Health has some great stuff.
That's good.
I go to PubMed quite a bit because that's all National Institute of Health stuff. And when you get a positive, a good write up on the National Institute of Health about specific studies that are being done and seeing results that are posted on a .gov website,
Right.
those are accurate.
That you when you see .gov, you know it's accurate. And listen, I think the word is out, and
Mhm.
there's companies like Coca-Cola that are
Mhm.
now at least looking at infusing soft drinks or
Mhm.
something. Not all sodas, but they're thinking about
Well,
bringing up a
they also have like vitamin water-ish type things too.
right. So
Yeah.
people are looking at infusing different products with it.
Mhm.
So I think the word is out about CBD and what it's doing. And at the same time, you start to see at least this country, the anxiety levels are raising. And I don't know if
Mm.
that's part food, if that's because people are overworked, however it is. So I think doctors, and there are a lot of people that are starting to figure out that, hey, the same stuff that we're pumping down people just isn't working
Yeah.
anymore. There must be something over here that people are talking about and saying, I think I found something for me. So it's kind of hard to ignore at this point.
And also, we're we're so early into the understanding of the endocannabinoid system as well, but endocannabinoid deficiencies have
Mm,
been really talked about when it comes to the root cause of a lot of problems.
right.
That it's actually the deficiency in your endocannabinoid system that could be causing anxiety, could be causing immune problems, because it's that messenger in your body. And if the messages aren't getting through, then your body is going to start failing in certain areas. So that's another field of study that's going to come around. And that's why possibly, theoretically or whatever, might be why cannabinoids are working so well in some people, because they might have an endocannabinoid deficiency.
Now, what do you
So,
think is happening to people? What do you think we're doing to our bodies that we just all of a sudden become deficient versus
well,
40 years ago, or were we always?
yeah, no, well, 40 years ago, hemp and all the cannabinoids that are within hemp were in our food chain. They
True.
were. There was a feed for livestock. It was in the flour. Hemp had been part of the American society, and I mean globally, for thousands of years.
Hmm.
So when our country just cut it
Rips
off,
it out.
rips it
Yeah.
out, and then let's look at the last few generations. Let's look at the increase of specific illnesses that have happened since then. I don't know, but it's going to be studied now that we actually since Rafi Meshulam, I guess it was in the 80s, really discovered the endocannabinoid system. There's going to be some studies trying to find out, okay, well, what are these deficiencies, since we haven't had them in our bodies for so long, and we're putting them back in, what were these deficiencies causing?
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah. Yep.
yeah, so we're going to find out. And I have a feeling that a lot of our illnesses,
Are tied to it.
yeah, I really do. I mean, they say that it has something to do with the messaging system in your body. Your body is built to heal itself.
Hmm.
But if you can't get, if your body can't talk to itself to tell it what it needs,
How does
then
it heal itself?
exactly. So I'm really interested, in the next decade. Oh my gosh, the things that we're going to learn.
Yeah, totally. And that's the other thing that brings up a really good point that I didn't think of is what is tied to if we do figure out that we're truly deficient, and
Mm-hmm,
this has been filling that deficient void, if that's not a redundant statement.
mm-hmm,
What what was it? Because again, I don't. This is. I know the disclaimer out there is that we can't make guarantees about what it does. I can only tell
exactly.
you what it's done for me, but I've heard people say about digestive issues,
Mm-hmm,
arthritis.
mm-hmm.
What could IBS be a result of some deficiency?
I can tell you that it helps IBS. Personally, I can tell you that. Oh, and Crohn's disease. I mean,
right,
it is.
Crohn's disease. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
does
So
great things with that.
there's so many different things that is tied to it. And listen, so I know the focus here is about CBD, but if I
Mm-hmm,
could just take one layer back in
mm-hmm.
terms of cannabis,
Oh, mm-hmm,
I've always thought to myself that, listen, once the government figures out a way to tax
mm-hmm.
cannabis and organize it so that they can funnel the money through and not have it
Yes.
all over the place, they'll open it up. But
Mm-hmm.
it was never really about, we care about you, it's a gateway drug, it's this and that.
No.
I always knew, again, even somebody who's not a smoker per se, but
Mm-hmm.
I just knew there was money, politics, lobbying tied to it so tightly that they're like, hey, once we figure out how to funnel this directly through and not every Tom, Dick, and Harry has their
Mm-hmm.
hands in it, then we'll open it up for everybody and it's free game. And now you see within this industry,
Mm-hmm.
cannabis and ultimately CBD, you see JP Morgan, I just mentioned Coke, you see
Mm-hmm.
so many different companies sticking their hand and getting ahead of it. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's either for the cannabis industry or playing a role ultimately in the CBD industry,
Mm-hmm.
they want to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, seriously, let's take a look at this. How much money is made off of search and seizures?
Right.
Search and seizures. It has to get to the point where they were able to make more money taxing cannabis than they were bringing in for search and seizures.
Right.
I mean, the local governments, that they paid a lot of bills with search and seizures.
Oh, I mean, police stations with their tanks and the vehicles and all of that stuff are fully loaded because of some of this. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's an economy that's built around this. You know,
Look at the private jails. Look at the court fees. Look, I mean, there's an entire economy based on imprisoning, and let's face it, the majority were people of color.
Yeah.
You know, on a freaking ounce of cannabis.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, no,
So I think-
it's always been about the money.
It always, and that so I you know, after starting to put all that together and reading, you start to take, you know, first of all, again, for those who don't want the, you know, kind of the psychedelic effects around you know, marijuana, if they're not marijuana smokers, then CBD is certainly something that you should try. You know, depending on who you go with, again, you need to do your research behind that. I found Charlotte's Web to be really good. There's, I believe Sanjay Gupta did a special on a little girl who had seizures at one point, which is something that I read after I started Charlotte's Web. So it was all of these things that just started to solidify that I must be going down the right path somewhere.
Yeah, because Sanjay Gupta was very much against legalization and use of cannabis.
Yes,
hugely.
he was.
And then he got educated. I mean, and actually, Dr. Alan Shackelford was the doctor that he interviewed in that first one, and that was actually my cannabis doctor.
Oh,
And
really?
and he told me, because I had horrific asthma. You know, I was at 20% lung capacity. I was on the 500 Advair, and he said, Dawn, you need to use cannabis. And he said, but don't smoke it, get a vaporizer. And at the time I was in banking, and I was like, I can't do it. You know, but the side effects of the inhalers were 50% increase in risk of death from an asthma attack. You know, so it's like, that's not a good side effect. But then as you know, as time went by and CBD came out, and I started taking CBD for pain and stuff, and the funny thing is that, you know, as I was taking it, you know, I was told you how I was dosing it and stuff. A week went by, and I realized, oh my God, I haven't taken my inhaler in a week.
Wow.
And so he was right, and it was because the type of asthma that I have is, you know, it's the spasms and it's the inflammation are two of the main components of my asthma, and it's an antispasmodic and anti-inflammatory. So it's like, oh, he was right. Yeah, great.
And CBD is known to, you know, or is at least said to reduce inflammation.
Yes.
Which makes sense for those who suffer with, you know, asthma and different things that, you know, creates inflammation inside your body a lot of times.
Yeah.
What do you do today, Dawn? What do you? I know what you started with, kind of, and what is it you do in terms of dosage and stuff today?
I use a lot of different things because of what I do to help people. So you know, I have different people on the podcast, and I like to use their products to, you know, try to see what, you know, what they have to offer. And I just had one, and I'm going to try to get him on the podcast. I just had a water soluble one that actually has turmeric in it.
Is that from Bluebird? Is it? No, not Blue.
Let me look real quick. He's in my LinkedIn.
I just had this discussion. Maybe it was with Vadim, where we talked about turmeric being inside of kind of a water soluble.
Yeah, I'll pull it up because I've got him right here. And I was like, what in the heck? His name is Perry Moore.
Perry Moore.
And let me see Murphy's Natural Solutions. So there's probably one, you know, more than one. It's got curcumin, which is, I guess, part of turmeric. So there's obviously a few of them, but I was surprised. You know, I was like, you know, and that's what's so cool is that you've got so many different people creating things based on what's worked for them.
Yep.
based on what they've studied, especially people with essential oils and things like that. People, naturopaths, homeopaths, and it's wonderful. But and then one of the other things I do is that outside of my 9-to-5 job is I have a company called Haven CBD, and I work with people that are on Medicaid and disability and disabled veterans. And I work with different companies, and I'm able to get them CBD at $5 over wholesale cost. Because let's face it, people on Medicaid cannot afford CBD. People on disability, these people need this for their health, and they can't afford it. So I have different products that I've, with different people, companies that work with us so that we can help people. But right now, I am using Golden Leaf's tincture. They're strawberry, because I like strawberry. And I'm also using their gummies. And the thing that I like about gummies is that I can have some in my purse. So like what you're saying, like if you have a breakthrough event where you get extra symptoms.
You can just pop one real quick. Yep.
Yeah. And then also Glow CBD has, they have, it's a chewable, and that dissolves in your mouth, which is also real nice. But there are a lot of really good companies about it. But what I say is, if you cannot talk to somebody at the company, do not take the product.
Agreed.
Because
totally.
because you got to have that integrity.
Totally.
Got to.
And I mean, there's even companies out there that will share their test reports.
Oh, okay. Here's the thing. I would not buy a product if I cannot see the test results. I won't do it.
Yep.
I won't do it. And I mean, let's face it, they can fake test results.
Well, true. But if they even know what a test result is, good start. Because a lot of these companies are kind of like, let's just package up sawdust. I mean, they're doing this thing. But if so some of it, but going back to your point, I think 40-something minutes ago where you said, hey, look, you really have to be careful who you pick. It does come down to that. So some of the names that we mentioned are, Charlotte's Web, I know that's why I said the name on here, because some of the others there's some that I talk with Vadim with, and him and I kind of believe in, but I'm not willing to throw their name out there just yet. Because again, I'm the walking guinea pig here, but I do I do look at it, Dawn, too, like a sort of legacy thing. I remember when my son was younger, he had levels of panic attacks that I could see, and he doesn't have them anymore. So I don't know if he's necessarily growing out of them, but when he gets older, I want to be able to say, hey, I experimented on myself. Here's what I found to work. I want to be able to leave a legacy in that regard to say, look, we have this in a way, and it's okay, but let's deal with it head on rather than it being just kind of under the wraps. And again, my dad just kind of dying, and along the way, I'm trying to figure this thing out. So, people, different products will work for different people. Different dosages will work for different people. Again, I may take a smaller dosage. Somebody else may have to go higher, but the only way you're going to figure that out is by starting. And I always say start small, because you can always, the reason why I don't go big, Dawn, is because if I go big, there's really nowhere to go other than that. But if I start small, I kind of know where my
and the only time I go big is when there's someone who has significant symptoms. I mean, where they are seriously in need of help. Like when you've got someone who is trying to get off opioids, and you have someone who is trying to prevent having to get infusions for the rheumatoid arthritis, because the side effect of some of these infusions is leukemia.
Right.
When you have someone who's in chronic pain, like for example, my mother, she was on Oxycontin, on 3 seizure medications, and fentanyl. And so when you got someone whose body is so out of whack, who has been medicated for a decade,
you got to kind of shock it.
You got to shock it.
Totally.
But for your average person with, whose symptoms are already under control, in a different way, or are manageable, not to the point where it's creating like their symptoms are not being managed, and it's creating anxiety on top of it, and it's like a snowball.
Yeah.
That's when you have to step in, to be honest, a lot of the people that come to me, they're at the end of the rope.
Oh yeah.
So
And I can imagine, based on the work that you do, how some people are like, this is my last resort in some
yeah,
area.
and
And
so you shock them for a few days, and then you go down, and then find their sweet spot. But that's the thing that's so beautiful about CBD. And to be honest with I am not against cannabis either. We talk about CBD because it's legal in all 50 states. It's a
Yeah.
federally legal thing. So people do what you will. I'm not a person that likes to get intoxicated, so it's just not my thing. But the great thing about CBD and cannabis as a whole is that it is something that you can work with the dosing on your own, keep
Yep.
a journal, and find out what works for you.
Totally. And on the flip side, I would say, Dawn, this is what I did was
Mhm.
find out what your triggers are. So for example, one of my biggest triggers with this is an interesting tie-in,
Mhm.
was coffee. And now they
Uh-huh.
have infused
Yes.
coffee with CBD. So it's those areas where you'd be surprised if you start journaling down what are some of your challenges,
Mhm.
that CBD now has a response to it, or you can replace either your consumption in certain areas, or
Mhm.
as you pointed out, there's maybe simpler ways where you're at a conference and you necessarily don't want to have tinctures and you're dropping in front of the you're, you're dropping in the hallway, but you can pop a gummy in, so
Mhm.
that works just as good for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And what the other thing that I like, Priest, is that you are still trying different things. You have your go-to,
Yep.
but you are experimenting with different things. You're finding, okay, this one didn't work. This is like watery. This is probably didn't even have the potency that it's stated on the label.
That's
It's
right.
very, very possible.
Yep.
But I appreciate the fact that you, like you said, you are your own lab experiment. You are your own guinea pig,
I am.
and you can really help others by doing that.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why, I thank you for having me on the podcast and being part of this, because, although I don't necessarily have a platform that says CBD all day long, there is a story for me that CBD has helped me, and I want to help others. And I think there's a lot of areas to do that in, right? We talked about
Mhm.
cannabis a little bit. Again, we're talking about CBD, but cannabis obviously has its tie-in. I was gonna tell you about a friend that kind of makes his own tinctures,
Mhm.
um,
Good.
out of direct cannabis. But as you pointed out, criminal justice reform is something that's very important for me. And I've never been to jail. I've never been in prison. I have no intentions on going anytime soon or ever. But
Good.
but I there's still a lot of men that I used to spend time in the jails talking to the men, encouraging them, and you would hear what they're in for, and it's like, man, we have families broken up for some of this
Yeah.
stuff. Again, I'm not a smoker, but really, you're in here for that. So
Mhm.
it's not to minimize things that that has happened out there, but we do have to look at you know our government from top to bottom, as we
Yeah.
talked about, taxes that are starting to roll in states, and where do you think that money's going to go? So you take somewhere like Colorado,
Mhm.
where I just read a report. I don't know if it's like a quarter million or a quarter
Billion.
yeah, quarter billion
Mhm.
dollars or somewhere along those lines.
Mhm.
What do you think happens to that? Or where do you
Oh,
think
we
that's
know what
going in any
happens to
other state?
ours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there there's a lot that is important to me just on so many levels that doesn't necessarily direct me or doesn't affect me directly.
Right. And that's the thing, and that's, I see memes all the time on Facebook. It's like, I don't have to have breast cancer to support breast cancer. I don't have to be LGBTQ to support LGBTQ. I don't have to smoke cannabis to support cannabis. You know,
Totally.
it's not about necessarily me. It's about, you know, our society.
Right.
And when you use something to literally squelch, you know, a population,
Yeah.
it's unacceptable. And you know, they've got plenty of data showing the skew when it comes to the people that are being locked up over it, and the
Totally.
people that are not being locked up. So I mean,
Totally.
yeah, I had a few episodes back. I had Janet from Leafly, and
Yep.
yeah,
I have the rap. Yep.
yeah, and she talked about, you know, Bill de Blasio and what he's talking about with
New York.
And you know, wiping records clean, and you know, she gave the figures, the percentages and everything of, you know, people of color compared to white, and literally, you know, how they use this prohibition, which the prohibition came in effect specifically for money reasons, you know, because of the people, you know, like the Sierra Pacific, the tree people, the, you know, the petro, the other uses for, you know, that they're like, oh no, we want paper, not hemp. You know, we're losing money. We don't want hemp. We want cotton. We're losing money. You know, so the people with the money said, get rid of cannabis because, you know, make it illegal so that we can keep making money. So it started with money. It's ending with money. It's all been about money the whole time. And then, you know, let's throw in a little bit of racism while we're at it. Let's call it marijuana. You know, it's like, it is one screwed up cluster, you know? So, and
Yeah,
what has it done to our health in the meantime?
Yeah, and who's going to change that? I'm going to tell you right now. I was talking to somebody, and so I live in North Carolina, the South, still part of the Bible Belt, although North Carolina is far different than South Carolina in that regard.
I lived in Memphis for 10 years. So,
yeah. So you understand
Yeah.
kind of how the Southern, so they still have a liquor store that's run by the state and all this and that. But North Carolina is largely, or was known as, tobacco farming. So you have a lot of these people that still have farms, they still have businesses, and once they start to push on the government to say, look, now we need to start growing something out there, what do you think that something is going to be? And
well, the farm bill,
farm bill that Trump just passed, when was it, late last year or something like that?
Yeah, well, actually, I think he signed it at the beginning of this year. It passed. It passed Congress, but no, it went into effect January 1st. But yeah, it passed at the end of December. Yeah, and he signed it at the end of December.
Right. So that was one area where it's, you know, listen, that's a major step, particularly for this political climate. I believe we're going to see some massive changes.
I'm thrilled about it. And let's be honest. I mean, you know, McConnell, Kentucky, one of the biggest tobacco states as well. You know, he's helping us farmers, and fortunately, you know, it gets to trickle down. One of the few trickle down things that actually works to all of the states, so that, you know, all the farmers can start growing it. And North Carolina. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe what they're going to be able to accomplish there.
It'll be big. That's why I said North Carolina. People are thinking the opposite of North Carolina, where they'll say it'll be the last place. They just put a Democratic governor in place. They have the farming, they have the land. Again, this was known as they call it Tobacco Alley in some areas. So farmers are pushing, and we had our first hemp farm. I believe our first and only hemp farm. Again, this is where the hemp comes in at, and
industrial hemp.
Yeah, it's almost like this, how people are winking, like we have a hemp farm here, and it's like, well, what do they grow in a hemp farm? I'd be interested to know. But so, you know, we had our first hemp farm that was just made it on the news like last year in September or something of that nature, and it was a big deal. And then they put on within our vote, you know, when we did local votes here, how many people want to open up legal marijuana, and I believe it was 70+%.
Nice.
Kind of like, I think the people have spoken.
Yeah. And it's going to be up to your governor. I mean, like our governor, Hickenlooper, he was not thrilled. But he said, you know what? You voted it in.
Now
I'm your
you're gonna
governor, and I'm going to do it.
Yep.
So, and he still has reservations about recreational legalization here. But, you know, he was a good governor, and he listened to the people, listened to the will of the people.
That's largely the job, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
got to listen to your constituents and people that
That's
brought
what
you.
that's what I've heard. But
Right. I don't know if we're seeing a lot of that, but that's
you know, it's like wait, lobbyists or constituents? I don't know.
but you know what is interesting, not to
Mhm.
talk politics, but this stuff is just repeating itself over and over again. I was listening to like hardcore history, and I
Mhm.
kind of follow a lot of history stuff, and I've been around for a little while now. You just
Hey, I'm
realize,
52, you're 44. Yeah, we've
all
been
right,
here for a while.
yeah, we've seen a thing or two,
Mhm.
and you just realize some of this kind of repeats itself, and it'll
Mhm.
be another wave of 4 years of something else.
Mhm.
You know, so I'm trying to remain positive.
Well, I like the fact that, I mean, it really does have a solid bipartisan support system.
It
I
does.
mean, it really does. So,
It
and
does.
and I know, you know, that there are a lot of farmers out there that are receiving subsidies to not even plant. They would much rather plant. They're being
Yes.
paid not to plant. It's like, okay, let's get this show on the road. Let's become the, you know, the super power of hemp. When you
Well,
look at the stuff that comes in internationally, and a
mhm.
lot of, you know, we've got a lot of it coming in from China, and that's why you have to be really careful about what you're doing and making
Yes.
sure that you look at those test results,
Yes.
because there's some heavy metal stuff coming in from over there, because
Totally.
hemp, you know, growing hemp, it's a remediator for the soil, and so it sucks up all the stuff from the soil. So you got to be careful.
The
But we got,
environment in general is just horrible for it
yeah,
out there. So yeah,
yeah.
absolutely,
But we got
absolutely.
some beautiful stuff coming in from, you know, the Netherlands, and we've got stuff coming in from Canada, you know, all over the place. But America has always been known for being the farmland, and this is a way for us to do this again, and to really be able to
Take
just,
the lead.
yeah, and bring pride back to the farmland, and give families their living back. You know, when you put money into the hands of a farmer, he's going to buy more equipment. He's going to buy, you know, another truck. He's going to use that money. It's a great boost for the economy, and I'm so excited about the potential, and we
Yeah.
just have to make sure that you know, we keep the train on the tracks.
So how do you see CBD disrupting kind of the business world? I know we talked about farming and we talked about even infusing food, but how else do you see CBD disrupting business as we know it?
Well, on the industrial hemp side, you know, not as much CBD, but hemp in general, biofuel and plastics are going to be the first big shakeups
Hmm.
from
Mm.
you know, from that. But when it comes to CBD, I really believe, first of all, that you're going to see it infused, like you said, in a lot of different foods.
Mhm.
And FDA is going to have to, you know, come out and say, okay, it's a dietary supplement. And truly, it would be good for it to come out as a dietary supplement, because by saying that, it puts some regulation on it. You
Yeah.
know, because right now it's Wild West out there, and there's a
Well,
bazillion shades of gray on that. So
it's Wild West just in the vitamin and supplement industry to
yeah,
this thing,
and
right? I mean,
you cannot classify it as a supplement legally.
right.
So so I think they just need to put it on as a supplement, and go along their merry way. You know, that way it still falls under the practice of the FDA, and so that they can continue to monitor it when it comes to testing things that are making claims like that haven't been substantiated yet. You know that, but now that the Farm Bill has passed, we can really just break down the barriers when it comes to testing. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think is going to happen is, you know, there's, depending on who you talk to, between 80 and over 100 cannabinoids. And each one of those cannabinoids is going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about, the ones that help with sleep and the ones that help with, there's actually a specific one, I think it's THCV, that David Dawson on one of our episodes was talking about, and how it helps with blood sugar, like insulin stuff. And he's saying that that's going to be a huge diabetes thing.
That's
That
interesting.
he did he did a study on mice, and that they were able to create diabetes in mice. And then, but there's a certain, you'd have to go back and listen to the episode, but by using this one cannabinoid, they were able to regulate the blood sugar in the mice, and so that they didn't need insulin anymore.
Wow.
I
That'll be
believe it
big.
was exactly. And see, that's the thing. It's like there's been a lot of stuff that's look at the increase in diabetes.
Yes.
In the last however many.
Yes.
And so again, is it caused from a cannabinoid deficiency? So what I envision, my hope is that
cannabinoid deficiencies in cheeseburgers. I mean, it's
well,
been
yeah, okay. Well, I'm talking more about like type 1 diabetes.
right.
Yeah. So not I drink a 2-liter bottle of Coke for breakfast.
Mountain Dew, and then
not my baby has Mountain Dew in their bottle. So, no, we're not talking about that.
with a sucker in the other hand. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but okay, so my ultimate CBD fantasy, if you will, is to be able to walk into a Walgreens and to be able to go to a machine and push the buttons of the different cannabinoids that I want and have it create or put make a tincture, like spill out a tincture for me. It's like the Coke machines at Chipotle and Qdoba, and where it has all the flavors.
The flavors.
That's what I want, but I want it with cannabinoids, and I want it to spit out a tincture.
Hey, you might not want to say that too loud. I mean, that
I
is
have no
not
desire to make.
unreasonable.
I know, and I want it. I can't make it. I don't know that. Whatever. Somebody out there, please do this.
Do it.
Do it, please.
Well, that's where I'm saying that Coke and some of these companies, once they start stepping in, and they own it, and once you start seeing patents fly around and all that, it's only a matter of time. So speaking of that, I have a friend that actually he gets marijuana, and then he scrapes it, and then he bakes it. And then after he bakes it, he lets it set out for 5 days or something along those lines. And then he puts it in a jar of vodka, I believe it is.
Yeah. So
yep.
Extraction.
And then right. And so he's basically extracting it and then creating his own tinctures from there and all that.
Yeah, an alcohol extraction, an ethanol extraction is how they would refer to it in the industry.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's great, and it's very effective. And there's actually machines now. There's one called Magic Butter Machine, and that you can put the cannabis in. I've got a few friends that had those, and you put the plant in, and it cooks it and strains it, and I don't know, it does all sorts of stuff, and then it ends up bringing it out as a butter.
Wow.
Yeah, so that you can use it to cook with.
So that's why your CBD machine is not crazy.
No, it's not crazy at all.
Yeah.
And I want someone to make it, because I want to be able to go, you know what? I want to have a tincture that's going to give me, a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and push the buttons, and it pours it out into a little 30 ml bottle, and I'm on my way. I want that. And I think I don't think that it's that. I know I'm asking for a lot, but I don't think it's impossible. So I know I'm a pushy little lady, but I want what I want. So, somebody make it. No, I really do think that if we knew then what we know now, back then we didn't know about the endocannabinoid system. We didn't know that our bodies actually have specific receptors that can only, be maximized by plugging in with these cannabinoids.
Right.
Well, let's take that information, and let's move with it. And if we've got 80 to 100 or more cannabinoids, we need to find out which one does what. But then we also have to remember this is a plant. As a plant, the whole entourage effect, all the molecules work together. It's really meant to be used as a whole.
Yep.
But sometimes the whole is always going to, in my opinion, be better than the sum of its parts. But there are instances where, based on what the symptoms are or the condition is, you might need additional, like more CBD than a CBN, a CBG, a CB, CBC or something like that. You might need to play with that ratio a little bit. And to be frank, over the past decades or however many years, we have made a very big effort to ramp up the THC and knock down the other cannabinoids. So we need to be able to get to return to that, to that more of a 1-to-1 kind of ratio in the plant. We need to be able to find ways to express some of these, like the THCV, which is possibly a diabetic help, but to where we can express more of that in the plant. And so I just think that there's going to be an amazing amount of information coming to us in the next decade, and we're just going to have to try our best to kind of siphon through it and find out what it's going to be as an individual, what's going to help me. And one of the things I want to talk about, because you talk about these big companies coming in, and people get scared because of big companies. Little moms and pops and smaller and medium-sized companies are not going away. Let's take a look at beer.
Right.
Not everyone likes Budweiser.
Right.
So
yes.
You've got the smaller ones, you've got the boutique stuff. You will never get rid of the smaller companies. And the fact is, there is more than enough room for everybody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the pie is so large. I mean, as you pointed out, in the beer industry, alcohol industry in general, but these little companies that start, again, I'm in North Carolina, and here they have a lot of little draft companies popping up where they're coming out with their own beers. And most people are coming in asking for different beers, unique ciders, all kind of stuff that Budweiser and all them can't respond to. So, you're right. The mom and pop companies. The key here, though, for the smaller companies is finding out what their value prop is, right? The value proposition. They can't just say, hey, I sell it, so I need to be the one. As you pointed out, how are you educating your customers? And you're much more nimble than the big companies. The big companies are just getting involved. So you understand the intricacies within the business. How can you navigate and make the customer feel like they just have to come back to you because you're knowledgeable, your customer service is there. So there's other components, but this space is so large that if done right, people don't have to be squashed out for sure.
And for the smaller people, I mean, they are the ones that can do their own formulations specifically for an individual, like I'm talking about with the machine. Right. They can do that in their own, in their own lab. So if someone's coming in, my child is having seizures. Okay, well, let's try this. And then come back. Okay, now we're going to tweak it a little bit. We're going to add this cannabinoid. We're going to add this terpene. We're going to do this. They can do the custom formulation for people. Where a Budweiser sized place, there's no way they can do that.
Yeah, they're all about, kind of Ford assembly line approach to business. Whereas, here locally we have, I mentioned Whole Foods, but we have places like the hemp store. When you walk in, you just talked about dosage, how to turn some on or off and back up and on and off. You go in, those people are a lot more knowledgeable rather than the guy at Whole Foods that's just pointing to the aisle and you're still trying to figuring it out. So if you can, even if you just sell online, if you can find that same next door feeling, if you will, you'll be fine. But again, people have to not assume that just because you're in business, people will be there. So I hope small companies aren't afraid of the Budweisers and the Cokes of the world, because I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to botch it too. And not to mention, some people might feel like it's a little regulated better and they may feel more safer with it. But, some of their stuff may be watered down and have a different approach, because they're in it for capitalism.
Right. And that's the thing, is that people need to have options, and that's an option for them. It
That's
is. But, you know, not to get like woo woo or anything, but, you know, I think the people need to have kind of an abundance mindset to know that there is no limit.
Right.
The only limit is what you're putting on yourself.
That's
And
right.
so there's always a way to do things. I always recommend for any company that you make your lab results available. With Glow CBD, I had them on a few weeks back. Every bottle of theirs has a QR code that matches it'll take them to the specific lot and batch for that bottle and shows them all the lab results for it.
Oh, that's amazing.
And
That's
so
really cool.
I think that really is a way for people to differentiate themselves and to be very transparent and show them, hey, we're not afraid to show you what we've got.
Yeah, I wouldn't join an affiliate program. I wouldn't do business. I wouldn't take anything if I did not see you even put the effort in to put up test reports or even put one together. I mean, that just wouldn't be an option for me.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's why, as we originally started talking, that Charlotte's Web is just kind of an area that I stuck to. And again, I've danced around in other areas, but that's been my own experimentation. So
yeah, and they've been around for a long time. They have.
They
so
have.
yeah, and that's it's really great to be able to see how the industry has grown with respect to the different types of companies that are springing out, the different types of products that are coming and that are out there. And not to freak you out because you're a guy, but they even have cannabis tampons, and for women,
That's interesting.
that's a huge thing because I'm so sorry, Priest, but
now you're going to bring me down a dark alley. I don't know if I should walk down this way.
There's something known as menstrual cramps.
Oh,
and and they so anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic. It's a good thing.
Listen, I have daughters. My one daughter will be 21 in July. I have a 16-year-old, and of course I'm married. So I understand. I just you got now this environment. If I start talking about it, they'll be like, "Me too." On Priest Willis, he started talking about menstrual cramps. He knows nothing about our pain.
He's mansplaining. Yeah,
he's mansplaining.
Mansplaining. But and then they've also got like with the edibles. That's absolutely great. I mean, there's always been the edibles on the cannabis side, with the THC. But now to have edibles on the CBD side as well is awesome because you know what? Might not be easy to get an autistic child to take a tincture. I can tell you that it's not real easy to get my mom, who's early stage Alzheimer's, to take a tincture. But
really good point.
She really likes those gummies. And each gummy's got 20 milligrams in it, so we're doing it. So
eat up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't want to have extra sugar in my body. I don't need it. God knows I don't need it. But we've got so many different options. And then we have the CBD bath bombs. And so if you've got rheumatoid arthritis, to be able to soak in a bath of 50 milligrams of CBD,
or even creams.
Exactly, the topical creams. Yeah, creams are great. And then we've got, okay, so I know there's a good and bad when it comes to vapes, but you have to know what you're vaping. And you don't want, petroleum PG stuff in your vape. But if you can get something that's I don't want I don't want to inhale petroleum. Thank you very much. But if you get something that's just a pure oil, that's got more natural ingredients. For me, I use it as an inhaler. If I get symptoms, which break through from my tinctures and stuff like that, like this morning when the elevator at work broke and I had to walk up 6 flights of stairs to get to my office.
A little winded.
Yep. Take out a vape. Take a few puffs, and it helped with the spasms. So there's place for that too. You've got a nasal spray You've got actual CBD inhalers now. You've got
Because
just
otherwise, what are there's steroids in those, right? Like
oh yeah, and you mean in normal inhalers and stuff?
yes,
Oh God, yes,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I swear that's got to be why my voice is so low, because so I'm so old. They had not invented inhalers yet because I've had asthma my whole life, but at one
Like
point,
that's why I'm trimming my mustache. Like every
yeah,
now and then.
exactly. But I would go. I was so sick when I lived in Kentucky. I would go through an inhaler a week,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're supposed to last a month.
Yeah.
So that's bad. That's bad stuff. But and we've only just begun. Now they've got the CBD water. They've got the water soluble drops that you can that are tasteless. They're wonderful that you can put into a bottle of water. They've got oh gosh, they've got the sprays for your mouth. You can just spray it into your mouth.
Yeah.
And it dissolves very quickly. There's I mean, name one product that you haven't seen yet that you could put CBD into. So give somebody an idea about out there what they could create.
Oh well, we talked about infusing it in your food, right? So there's actually a restaurant, can't remember if it was in Atlanta or somewhere else, where the restaurant is popping up and they're making dishes infused, like seafood dishes and all that kind of good stuff infused in food. My point is, I don't know of not too many products. We talked about topical creams and stuff that that you could not get something with CBD associated to it. And just in general, I think that from my perspective, people will be doing themselves a disservice. Like if you're taking medicine and it's been working for you for 15 years and you're like, I'm going to stick with it, that's fine. But me, I'm always trying to peel back the layers of the onion a little bit and say, well, what is it doing to the parts that I can't see of my body? Right. So, if there are people like that out there, then these discussions will start to open up things for you. So you mentioned having an inhaler. Well, you kind of deal with that as an ailment. So you found what works for you from a vaping standpoint to kind of act as an inhaler in some sense. Well, somebody else may have a ailing part of their body that I couldn't even think of, like a back, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm sure, what the
they've
back,
got the transdermal patches.
Yes, with how it's medicated on the back of a sticky part where this could go on. We could talk all night about, what you could do to try to replace something just to test it. Like, so the back part is like, I'm going to keep going with these Bengay or icy hot ones.
Lidocaine.
But right. Lidocaine is the ingredient, but I'm going to slip in a CBD one every now and then just to see. I just want to see. So there's not too many products or ailments. Again, and this is, I don't want to be too ignorant because I don't know what people with cancer and other things suffer with. So I don't want to delve too far in that, but there's not too many things, that are a little bit different on the lighter side, if you will, if that makes sense, that you can't replace it with.
Right, for sure. Yeah, when you're talking life and death, that's a scary place to go.
I just
no, I wouldn't
begin to tell.
I can tell you though that CBD helps tremendously when it comes to side effects from chemotherapy. There have been people who have not missed a step, even going through their entire chemotherapy regime. Actually, one of them, there was a politician who, I think he's in Tennessee, it's either Tennessee or Kentucky, and he proposed the bill because he took, I believe it was CBD. I don't think it might have been cannabis as a whole plant, but one or the other. And he did not miss a day of work. As a politician, he did not get sick. He did not get anything because they given him opiates to take with his chemotherapy. He just said, no, I'm not taking those. He went home, and I do believe it was full plant cannabis, treated himself that way, and did not get even nauseous from the chemotherapy. So as a supplement to chemotherapy, it has proven And there were studies in that Rafi Meshulam's group did in Israel decades ago, and it was with children, children who were suffering from cancer and were going through chemotherapy. And in this study, he gave half of the children, I don't know if it was CBD or THC, but a cannabis product, and the
Some
other half,
form of cannabis.
yeah,
Yep.
and the other half nothing. And he's a big CBD person. He's not a big THC person. He's not a fan of especially recreational. But after a few weeks, the nurses on their own started giving all of the kids the cannabis product because they could not bear to see the ones that were not getting it, how sick they were compared to the other ones.
Yeah, listen, there's something to be said for it that I think, and again, I go back to this. I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
No way. I mean, the way I did it was so I would take citalopram. I think I was taking 10 milligrams of citalopram, and I would literally take 1-2 of citalopram, and then I would do the 2 droplets I told you about of
Charlotte's Web
CBD. Yep. The Charlotte's Web CBD. Yep. And then I would go back and I was slowly weaning myself because first of all, with any kind of anxiety medication, they say you shouldn't just go completely cold turkey.
Yeah, I did that once.
I did that once too, and you feel the weirdest. You almost that's just a different thing that happened to me. I would feel dizzy.
I had vertigo.
Yeah, well, I didn't have vertigo, but it feels like vertigo can set in. It absolutely. You're 100% spot on. It feels like when I try to explain it to my wife, I was like, it's not vertigo, but it feels like you go into some store that has bright lights and you feel like you feel off kilter. So they say you're not supposed to jump off it to begin with, but if you're weaning yourself and you're trying to experiment with yourself, that's how I did it.
Yeah. And remember, it is your body.
Yep.
It's not your doctor's body.
That's right. Yeah.
So, but I would always recommend that if you are on a medication, do a lot of research. One of the very unfortunate things that we have in the medical system right now is that doctors can fire you for taking cannabis products. And that's why my mother is not taking them right now, because her doctor, her pain doctor, said that he would fire her as a patient if she continued. And so she is back on the fentanyl and the Oxycontin.
Wow.
And her seizures have gotten worse. So, yeah, because she's in Tennessee. So I know that they're submitting a bill in Tennessee, or that they already have. I pray to God that it passes quickly so that, people can get the treatments that they need, be able to treat themselves in a way that they don't have to deal with the side effects, and where they can control their own symptoms a little bit better. So,
and I as a doctor, I kind of understand. So if I'm a doctor and I went through 8-10 years of school, whatever they go through, and you've studied one thing and you've loosely looked at this other thing, so you don't really understand a lot about it, but it's probably safe enough for you, particularly as insurance and malpractice is involved, that you do not want to you don't want to play any games with this person taking something totally different, and then they got some kind of metals, and because you don't know if Charlotte Webb is better, because again, you're a doctor, you've studied this version of medicine, you don't understand this version completely. They don't know as much as you and some of the other people out there. So you're kind of, it's CYA at that point,
right? And
you probably could even be a doctor and be like, look, I believe in it personally, but my insurance won't allow me to treat you.
Right, and that's why the industry needs to find a way to deal with that. They need to find some sort of waiver or something, so where, if a person is getting results, then they, individuals need, individuals need to be able to have the right to experiment with with their medication. It's their body, and they know it better than the doctor does.
Yeah.
But I do understand. I mean, I definitely do, because it's scary, because it's also like, well, how is it going to affect the other medication that she's on? And so I know that CBD has a tendency to be a blood thinner. So someone might say, oh God, I'm on blood thinners. It's like, okay, well, here's what you do. Let's go ahead and just test every week. Let's see where your blood sugar, your blood, I don't know, is it blood
Thickness
density?
level.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, so test it every week, and then find out, okay, if I take this much CBD, then I only have to take this much, of Coumadin. If I increase it, then I take less of this. Track it.
Or if somebody just has issues with clotting, like my father used to have clotting issues, particularly in his legs for a period. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I get it, but I also think that, we do need to give a little bit control back to the patients as well, to be able to experiment on themselves, like me, who is somebody that's before you today saying, look, I'm happy. I didn't have depression, but when I say I'm happy, I'm saying I'm happy with my results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a lot to learn. The schools, I really hope, are going to be able to get in there, because honestly, the universities, I think, are the best source of studies out there. But there has to be some significant studies done on the endocannabinoid system as a whole to try to figure, to really fine tune it, because they're not teaching it at all in the medical schools, and it needs to be taught.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that time has come in. Listen, college in general is just an antiquated system. And I think that has slowly changed even today, where now they're just starting to teach for the new age of workers. But colleges always are like 5 to 10 years behind what they should. So that's coming, but that's to be continued.
Yeah, well, I know that Cornell did a study with dogs, and they did, I think it was a triple blind or something, where it was carprofen, CBD, and then placebo. It was for arthritis in geriatric dogs, and they showed that the CBD was as effective as the carprofen, which is the pharmaceutical.
That's interesting.
But without the side effects. So they're starting. CSU here in Colorado was doing a study with CBD and canine leukemia. So because it's a vet type of college, so they're starting, and the more research, and the more, I think it's really a great opportunity for schools to be able to really get the attention of their students, also to be able to help, if they can do research like that.
Well, there's a school here in North Carolina that is the first school of its kind that will be totally dedicated to being certified, and I believe getting a degree around cannabis.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna share that link with you. I don't know if it's in the state, or I can't remember who it was, but I just read it.
Great.
And maybe it's Wake Tech, our technical college. But either way, somebody here is actually working their way towards that already.
Good. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to share. So,
yep.
All right. Well, Priest, I'm so glad you joined us tonight.
Me too, Dawn. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
If you have one thing to share with them, with the listeners, what do you want to share?
Listen, I think the most important thing is our health, right? Without our health, everything else just kind of doesn't matter. So if there's one thing that I could share, maybe that you could take away from what you and I talked about tonight, Dawn, is just that, find out that thing that's, keeping you up at night, literally and figuratively in some areas. So health is important. I know that when I say that, I kind of laugh, because every now and then I'll lay up in the bed eating a nutty bar or something, watching a football game. But I mean, from a holistic approach, there's just some things that we need to dig deeper and not always necessarily wait around for somebody else to tell us what the answer is. So, health is key for me.
Yeah, very much so. And I also want to thank Priest because Priest is my lucky charm today. Before we started, we were at 99,990 plays, and right now we are at 100,011. Yay!
Woo!
Thank you, Priest.
Congrats.
We topped 100,000, so yay!
Congrats to you.
And I'll always remember that it was Priest that I did it with. So this is awesome. We broke that barrier. Now we got to break 1 million. So
Well, they say 100,000 is the hardest to get to. 1 million is typically the easiest.
okay, well, let's go for that.
We'll see.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And until next episode, remember, stay happy and stay healthy.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.